Hey you guys, Sky here from Skyhope, and today I want to go over the exposure triangle. Now, first off, I want to address that yes, I have been going for a really long time. I do apologize, but I have a good reason for it. If you haven't noticed the camera quality, I have upgraded my camera. I've just recently purchased the Panasonic Lumix G7. It's a really good camera. I have an unboxing for it. I'm not sure if I'm gonna release it. It is kind of bad.
Doctor, give it to me straight.
No, it's really bad. But that's not the point. Today I want to go over the exposure triangle and talk about aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and how all of them are linked together and how you can use them to your advantage to make a better video. So I'm going to show you some tricks, some techniques that you can do on your own camera or even on your phone in order to make a very quality cinematic looking video. So without further ado, let's jump right into the tutorial. To learn how to use all three of these, we need to know what they are. We'll start with aperture. The textbook definition of aperture is a space through which light passes in an optical or photographic instrument, especially the variable opening by which light enters a camera. To put it simply, it's how much light will be received by the camera. This is usually measured in stops. The typical range in f-stops goes from 1.4 to 32. Each increasing increment means that the lens diaphragm gets smaller, allowing less light and creating a wider depth of field. But what is depth of field? The depth of field is the range of how much objects in your camera are in focus. Take this picture for instance. See how blurred the background is? This has a very shallow depth of field. Now take a picture like this. This has a very wide depth of field. We can take this and apply it to our camera settings. Here's a picture of my subject about 20 feet away with an f-stop of 1.4. Everything in the background is blurred. Now here's the same picture with an f-stop of 16. Almost everything is now in focus. Let's move on to shutter speed. Shutter speed is the length of time when the film or digital sensor inside the camera is exposed to light. Think of your camera as one of those old film cameras. They used to use a circle called a shutter with an angle cut out, whether it be 180 degrees, 90 degrees, 45 degrees, and only allows so many frames to be exposed in that second. So the standard shutter speed for a video at 24 frames per second is 1/48. This means that every second the shutter will rotate 48 times, allowing 2 frames to be exposed to the shutter each time it rotates. Now, what does the change in shutter speed mean for the image? 1. The higher the shutter speed means the less amount of motion blur in the image. Take a look at this clip at 1/120th and compare it to this at 1/48th. Higher shutter speeds are better for slow motion clips because when you slow them down, you have more clean frames and less motion blur behind it. Also, as you see, the image becomes darker with a higher shutter speed. But what if you want a sharp slow motion image but don't want the image so dark? That's where ISO comes in handy. ISO is a camera's sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO, the brighter the image gets. However, with the addition of brightness also comes the addition of grain. Grain is the little speckles you see on the camera. This stuff. It's easily seen on solid color areas or in the dark. So don't turn it up too high if you want to avoid this. The best suggestion is to always use as much light as possible on your subject. You can always darken an image, but it gets pretty difficult to brighten up without adding noise. Now that we covered these three, let's get into some examples of the settings you want to use for the type of content that you're filming. So the settings that I'm using for this, it's a vlog type video. As you see, it's moving really fast. That's the 60 frames I have it on. I have an f-stop of 22 and a shutter speed of 1/100. Kind of translates to around 1/120. This camera is a little different. This is the Panasonic Lumix G7 that I'm recording on. So if you want this type of style of video, this is the settings that you might want to use. I have a really high ISO right now. It's at 6,400 And yeah, that's basically the camera style that you want. I'm just using a handheld just like this, and that's it. Okay, so the high shutter speed that you're looking at when I move my hand back and forth like this, that means that we are trying to achieve a very cinematic, high frame rate looking video. So the camera settings that I have right now is that this is at 29.97 frames per second with an f-stop of 22, and the shutter speed is at 1/250. The camera settings on the Lumix, like I said before, is a little different than your normal camera or the typical range of cameras. Now this is quite different though if you're trying to get a very beautiful slow motion, probably like a romantic type of movie, which is what we're gonna move on to next now. Now this is 29.97. I did have to get a little closer to the camera because the sky gets washed out. As you see, when I move my hand back and forth, it's a lot more motion blurred. And obviously color correction goes a lot into this as well, but just the regular camera settings that you will want to use is something with a very low shutter speed. So this is 1/120th, and the aperture is an f/16, and the background is very shallow. Like you can barely see anything back there. Now certain lenses are better to use. I might make a separate video on that, on why prime lenses might be better to use than regular ones. I just realized that this is out of focus. So as you see, the background even got even more blurred when I changed the focal length of the ring. And then there's always the standard film and shutter speed that you want to use. So I'll go to that now. Just to let you know, I haven't even changed the ISO. It's still been at 6,400 this entire time. And there hasn't been any sort of grain in the background, at least not very noticeably. And this is good because I'm outdoors. Now this is a lot different if you're indoors and the lighting is a lot different. So you don't want to have the ISO up so high, and you want to use as much possible light as possible, unlike the natural light. And it is actually dusk right now. It is currently the winter time and the sun goes down really fast. So it's only around 5 o'clock right now and the sun is setting. It looks very nice, it's very beautiful. But as you see, this looks like a normal looking video. That's because the frame rate is at 24 frames per second. Then we have our f-stop at 18, and then we have the shutter speed 1/40. So it looks like a very normal looking video. The ISO, it hasn't obscured the background. You can still see details within the sky itself. And this is probably the most standard setting that you want to use. Now you can always tweak it to your liking, but these are just some of the foundations for, or what you want to work with first off before you want to start tweaking stuff. And obviously it's a lot different than indoor lighting, but this is just one of the examples that you can use. I'm just showing you the difference between how you can use aperture, shutter speed, and ISO to create different movies to your advantage. So yeah. One last thing that I wanted to mention is that everything that you've seen on here, you can always get on a regular mobile device. This app right here that I have is called Open Camera, and you can easily do the exact same settings on here that you can on a regular camera. Now, obviously it's not going to be as good, but the same things that you do on here is the same things that you can do on a regular video camera. See that? This is where we can adjust the ISO. All sorts of things. And there's several apps out there, and they're constantly making new ones. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a regular digital camera. You can always get something like this on your phone. Well, that's the end of this video. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. Make sure to check out my website. I'll also be leaving that in the description below. And if you like this video, make sure to press that like button, share it, and hit subscribe. And when you do, don't forget to turn on notifications to get updates when I post my next video. I'll see you guys later.